Welcome to the Sean Trey Show. I got an awesome guest with me. Now, would you like to tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Will Stolerman, and at the moment I'm head of podcasts at Kindling Media, which is
Awesome.
a British company, and we make editorial podcasts. We've got our main show is an interview show with founders, showing what it's really like being a top entrepreneur and how you get there. But we're also working on some cool other stuff. So we're just getting into true crime. We've got a show coming out in Q4,
awesome.
which is about Hong Kong's most notorious gangster. So I started my career as a journalist in Hong Kong. Heard this story. It's box office, and most people in that part of the world have heard about it. But
I've heard this story. I've heard about this guy.
Yeah, he's fascinating. So he's called. Yeah. I don't want to tell you the whole story. You've got to tune in.
Tell me the name.
But I'll give you the. No. I'll give you the pitch actually, because I think it's a great yarn. So he's this guy called Big Spender, or nicknamed Big Spender, and he was seen as this criminal genius born into a criminal family, and he did a lot of nutty stuff. But his most famous crime was kidnapping the son of the richest man in Hong Kong. I think he might have been the richest man in Asia at the time. So he kidnapped this guy and turned up at the father's house, this tycoon, and he had a bomb vest strapped to his chest. And he said, if you ever want to see your son again, then I want 2 billion Hong Kong dollars, which is about $250 million US. And Li Ka-shing said, I can't get you that amount, quickly, but I can get you half of that. So 130 million US. And such was the power of the man. HSBC opened up the vaults, and over a period of days, he got away with 130 million US dollars. Crime wasn't reported to local Hong Kong police for reasons we'll go into on the show.
That's all.
And so that comes out in Q4. So we're more business podcast, but we if we see a good story, we're a young company, a small company, but we want to go after it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's what one of the things that I've loved about the rise of the podcast is like I'm a history major, and so I love history, and I love diving into history. And one of the things that I always loved, if you go back into the tradition of storytelling, I mean, like a theater in and of itself, you look at the Odyssey and the Iliad. These are essentially these were oral narratives that were passed down over time, and we don't even know if Homer was a real person. It's like these were stories they're shared. And you think about that, these were things that were committed to memory, but like it was like an oral tradition. Like these were stories that were shared. And then you go back, you go through the storytelling of I love the old radio shows, man. And I mean, that's before my time, but if you can still go and listen to this archival footage, or archival audio footage. It's just amazing, and hearing some of these. And one of the stories that I absolutely am blown away by the power of media. Two things that I absolutely love, that were just such amazing game changers. One was when they were playing the first cinema, like the first footage of moving footage, when like the train it was just this shot of a train running in the cinema. Like people thought people were freaking out, but go later on, War of the Worlds, when they played Orson Welles' War of the Worlds on the radio, and people literally thought that the world was ending. And to me, it's just, there's such a powerful oral tradition, and I love this return to narrative stories and talking, and we have such a wealth of information that can be shared, and interesting stories. But what got you into this whole field, man?
I mean, I guess I love stories, fundamentally. There's nothing better than consuming a good story. Like, I often ask people, would you prefer to go to a musical? Would you prefer to go to a play? And I'm a play every single time. I just think the storytelling is way better. In musicals, it gets, frankly, silly a lot of the time. I'm like, it doesn't work for me. It's the same with like ballet and opera and all of that kind of stuff. There's not enough story. I know there is some story. But yeah, give me a good story. So I actually started my career as a journalist in Hong Kong, but then I ultimately would love to spend as much time as possible in proper storytelling, as in not less news and more narrative.
Right? Have you seen the movie on Netflix, The Harder They Fall?
No, what was that?
Oh my God! Probably one of the best westerns. If you're a western person, it's probably one of the best. And the idea is it was like, it was such a powerful story, and I think that people forget that the humanity grew up with the gods and the mythos, and these were these great mythic stories that were passed down across time. Then the scientific revolution happened and people tossed all the gods and the myths out the window. Yet we created these new stories that became our modern mythos. And, and I absolutely think there's so much power. You look at like, you look at Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, like storytelling in and of its essence is this powerful thing that has been passed down throughout, humankind's history. And these stories, these archetypes are so universal. You go back, I remember there's a class in university had, we studied the Greek plays, the Greek playwrights, and we were reading Sophocles and Aristophanes, and stories could have been told today, Yeah. I mean, they're so universal, but they were so damn good. What type of stories did you get hooked on when you were coming up? What were some stories that you just were like, oh man, that's the one?
Oh, that is a great question.
Were you a book person? Were you a movie person?
Some book, but more film, and then like increasingly television, as television has got so good. Like a few different categories. I love a crime thriller, a detective. I find dramas a bit too stressful, actually. So don't go near that. But I mean, we were talking before we started recording about some of my favourite films. Actually, Fight Club is in there. Yeah, Seven. I like something sort of quite dark.
Oh my God.
There's actually, there's a few Kevin Spaceys in there. American Beauty, that is, though, I think the best drama ever for my money. Absolutely loved American Beauty.
That movie.
Huge amount of there's a decent chunk of animation as well in there, but some of the comedy, Shrek, fantastic. Okay. Ratatouille, and also we've named
Ratatouille's an amazing film, man.
It's got everything.
Phenomenally done.
I love it. Everyone can cook. That's a great film. But no, stories are brilliant. What I found, so I've started writing a script that I'm still writing on. I've rewritten 5 times in the last 5 years. It's a film script.
Awesome.
It's about intrusive thoughts. So intrusive thoughts are a type of thought that 80 to 90% of people have. Often quite fucked up. I don't know if we can swear on this. But
go to town.
Often sexual or violent. So some classic examples would be like you're waiting for a train to come and you think you could just jump in front of it, push someone in front of it, or you're holding a baby and you think I could just drop this thing, or you're on an edge, or a cliff edge. Most people have this, and it's hardly ever talked about. Anyway, so that's kind of like the topic.
I've had the thoughts like that, and I never knew there was a term for it. That's really interesting. Intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've found fascinating about this is that as I've got into it, so I did my first few writes. I was like, I can write. I've been a journalist. I can write a script. And the first 3 were awful. I mean, genuinely awful. So I was like, crap. I think if I need to do this, then I need... So I did a little course, learnt a bit more about structure. And what's fascinating, you talk about like the classics, Homer, etc., and they were writing great stories, is how uniform story structure is. And it was quite shocking, actually, to me, because it feels as an ignorant, just like a person who watches films and TV, that there's so much range and variety, because of course there is. But fundamentally, like the core building blocks, you have a protagonist who has a goal, like they want to put the ring in the volcano, and then you put more and more obstacles in their path. And they go through some change, some character change, because stories are really about transformation through it. And that's it. And when I'm watching something, if you can tell pretty much, you learn knowing just 3 things, like why a film isn't working. Typically, it's because the stakes aren't high enough, so you don't care. It's not going to be the end of the world. It's just like the so what question. Or like the opposition that the protagonist is facing to achieve their goal, just isn't meaningful enough, so you disengage.
Right.
But more often it's stakes. And so if you don't have stakes, no one cares. And, you know, it's amazing when you watch stuff now, if I find myself not engaged, it pretty much always comes back to that.
I studied as to be an actor, and I studied the Ivana Chubbuck method, and I absolutely love it. And one of her big things are obstacles. And, you know, and I'm doing my master's in screenwriting right now, so I feel you.
Oh, cool.
I love it. Yeah, I love screenwriting. Well, so I tell people this example, like, you know, one of the basic examples that I try to talk about, like, let's imagine my wife and daughter is stuck in the building next door, right? They're up on the penthouse. It's a big apartment building. They're on the 35th floor. Right? So I walk over, take the elevator up, get them, knock on the door. Hey guys, you want to go home? Okay, you're gonna take it back home. It's a pretty fucking horrible movie. It'd be done in 5 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's like there's no obstacles. You can't. You know, it's like, wow. You know. So what about you know, turn the power off, okay? You know, and now we're getting a little more serious. You got to walk to the top, right? Let's throw through. They've been kidnapped by the mob. Okay, now we're getting. How about we throw some zombies in the building and the power's out? You know, we're in the middle of a zombie apocalypse. Right? Well, suddenly you have something that works. You know, and that simple premise is kind of The Raid. Have you ever seen the movie The Raid?
I haven't, but I've nearly. That's the one in the. Is that the Indonesian one?
Yeah, the Indonesian one.
I've heard so much about that. Yeah.
It's essentially this guy's going to rescue someone in an apartment building, and he has to fight his way through this apartment building, and it's filled with like ninja level dudes. And it's like, wow, simple premise, but it's amazingly well done, you know. And they were like, it was one of those movies that was just it's a masterclass in low budget filmmaking, because essentially they had one apartment building and they locked themselves in there for a week. And these guys are brilliant for it, you know. This is great writing.
And why was it so good?
High stakes and a ton of obstacles. You know, this person has an extremely, you know, and that's what with Ivana Chubbuck, her technique. And I just was chatting with her the other day. She's an Oscar, you know, she's had all these people who win Oscars that studied with her. And one of her big things is, do we need to take a quick break?
Oh no, she's actually slipped out, and she did it very quietly. But the dog's now come down, and so there might be some dog noise. I can probably say that to your listeners.
Okay.
We've got a dog that you could hear tapping. The other thing is, I couldn't believe it just before I got on this. A fly or several flies entered the room, and it was just going zzz. It was like the scene in Breaking Bad with the fly. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I'm never going to be able to get rid of them. So if you're listening to this and you're hearing flies, I'm sorry.
I don't hear any flies right now, so hopefully it doesn't matter too much. But see, those are obstacles, and let's come back to Ivana Chubbuck. It's great things, you know. These are obstacles to accomplishing the goal of getting through the podcast, you know. So it's like, so for Ivana, the three most important things in a script are your overall objective for the character, which is essentially, you know, what is the thing that is this primal need that the character needs, you know. So it could be Star Wars, you know, what is Luke's primal need, you know, in the original series? You know, was it to be validated? Was it to be understood? Was it to be important? You know, and then, you know, in each scene you have a scene objective that is the objective that your character is. It's like the mini objective that helps your character get to the bigger objective. And, you know, except in the movie there are a series of obstacles that kind of line themselves up that prevent the character from achieving their objective. The more obstacles you have, the better the story is. And essentially, you know, in any movie with its, you know, worth its weight in gold has that. You know, it's just like you line them up and you're working through obstacles. And of course, you have your story arc, you have your character transformation. But, you know, essentially, it's about, you know, your character, and you put them into a place and time and see how they work. But one of the fun things that I was working with a class that I was teaching on screenwriting, you know, just it was like I was doing a workshop with some kids here, some young filmmakers here, and I was like, one of the most brilliant things to me in storytelling is the fact that setting and time and place are something that we constantly forget. But, you know, it's so important. Like, you know, George Lucas said, I'm going to create a Western and set it in space. And I was like, wow, suddenly, Star Wars is essentially, it's a samurai movie mixed with a western that he just set in space. Lucas was heavily influenced by the old samurai flicks and the old Japanese samurai movies, and also the same westerns. Which a lot of early westerns people don't realize were actually kind of, a lot of them were modeled on some of the samurai movies. People were totally studying Akira Kurosawa. Magnificent Seven was the Seven Samurai.
Yeah. That's very cool. I didn't know that.
Same story, different time and place.
But yeah, no, it is amazing how similar stuff is once you get into the nitty gritty, but also how compelling it is. Nothing better than a good story.
Right. So you now work in this world of podcasting and audio. Now, how did you get started in this path? How did you find it?
Well,
you're a journalist.
I'd been a journalist, and then I'd actually known what I wanted to do since I was like, I don't know, a young teen, which was become a journalist and then start a company to try to basically save the news media. Massive ego, obviously. But basically, news publishing got screwed in the digital transformation because people stopped paying for News Plus, ad rates got crushed. And so loads of businesses went out of business, massive consolidation, and journalists get fewer and fewer journalists, being able to pay them, etc. So I wanted to do that, and then I had the chance, founded my own business, raised some seed capital, built a team, a product. We built a journalism platform, which basically, this is sort of like 2013. It was a place, a bit like Medium, actually. Medium came out at a similar time, where people could publish content. This was current affairs, but across news, life, sport. So it could be, like a journalist, or it could be someone on the ground somewhere in Syria taking a photo. And the whole idea was to create an impartial platform where you could see diverse perspectives on like complex topics, whereas you have a particular editorial agenda with like the Guardian versus the Times, etc. We wanted to actually have a place where we could have sort of different opinions politely, and being able to debate and discuss them. And then from a contributor perspective, like the best content, as in the top performing content each month, got paid for as well. So we wanted to basically create sort of a free market for current affairs journalism. And anyway, that business ultimately failed, like so many media businesses and so many businesses. But no, it was a blow, and I was quite disillusioned with the whole media industry, to be honest. I was unsure how you'd make money in this world. And disillusioned, I moved to tech. So I worked at this UK startup called Monzo, which is like a fintech, a bank. And that was what they sort of call a rocket ship startup. So I joined at 50 people, and when I left 3 years later, there were 1,500 people.
Wow.
So it was massive. And then pretty much, I ended up being able to get back into media. And so this was in the pandemic, and I didn't know, having been at Monzo, how I get back into media, because I didn't want to be a journalist again. I wanted to go and still build a company, and I wanted to get closer to storytelling. And then I was just on the internet, the good old internet, saw a job post, looking for a head of podcasts, got in touch. Actually, it was quite lucky. I'd never really done this before, but it was one of those times when the stars align. But I'd seen there was the job. I'd applied for it, and then I really, really liked the look of the job. But it had been about 30 days since the job ad had been posted, and these were in the days online, with furlough, which was like this UK government scheme of like there was a mass, not unemployed, but people not in work, and I think it was working out to sort of like, on most jobs, if you hadn't applied in the first 3 or 4 days, you were screwed, because there would be 1,000 applicants. Sorry, 3 or 4 days.
No, but I'm saying like that. Sometimes it's hours. It's like it's just these things get flooded. Yeah,
they get absolutely flooded, And I was there on like day 30 and thought I've probably missed the boat. I looked back on the job board the next day and the ad had gone. So I thought, oh crap, they've closed the role. So then I got in touch on LinkedIn with Rich, the co-founder of Kindling Media, to say, hey, look, sorry, I don't know if it's still open. And he said, well, look, it has actually closed, but you've got a good application. So thanks for reaching out. And yeah, ended up getting it. 9 days later, I had the job offer, which was also like record time. And here I am back in stories, which, I feel very good about that.
So I want to take a little different direction, because I love the creative side. Now that I know that you like to write, this is kind of what type of stories would you like to be telling? Let's imagine that you got, like a genie's lamp, and you can pick whether it's Robin Williams or Will Smith or the upcoming, Dwayne Johnson version of the Aladdin's genie, whatever one you want. What would you wish for? What would you go for?
I think there's broadly 3 areas that I would, if I could, had a magic wand, that I would love to delve into at one point in my career. And I've read, and to be clear, I don't have a single credit to my name. Like, I haven't actually done anything yet. But would be around sort of like crime, thrillers, detectives, because they're my favorite. Give me a serial killer, TV series, any day of the week.
Like Mindhunter?
Absolutely love it. Great show.
So good.
Mindhunter's awesome. There was also similar, but Manhunt. Manhunt's come out recently. I haven't seen Manhunt. Their second season, so that's I think it was very good. Was the first one? Detective? I think the first one was Unabomber, actually, and then this next one is the LA Olympics. Was it the LA Olympics? One of the Olympics, and it's I mean, I could go on for days, but absolutely adore that. I've also found, this is quite interesting with taste and Netflix, that actually I've got fairly sort of distinct tastes, as in I'll try new things, but as I said, I'm not that into dramas. Whenever I try a drama, I end up like, don't love them. But actually, because you get recommendations with Netflix and stuff like this, you end up, they understand your habits ultimately better than you do. That actually I'm quite into fantasy, which I didn't know before, whether it's vampires to witches to hobbits to all of that kind of stuff. There's some great, like The Witcher, that first season that came out, absolutely binged it, and it was at phenomenal. Season 1, and at that point I was like, oh my god, maybe I'm really into this, and actually so's my wife, and we hadn't really realised, and so then we went on this sort of exploration. Any sort of like fantasy we saw, we gobbled up, and we didn't know it until that point. And then the final thing's comedy. I love I do like to have a laugh, and I think you don't actually get many good comedies, certainly not that as in I'm talking like films now. There's obviously some great TV shows, but I can't think of this. It's got to be like fewer than any other category, despite I imagine like when you get a good comedy, because it's universal, I would imagine the market for it could be huge, but there just aren't that many that come out. I think it's a bit different at TV. There's some great stuff on TV, but very few feature films. And my favourite comedy actually of all time is Superbad. I just love that.
Superbad is amazing.
I just love that, and it came. I was a bit older, but I was at university when I first saw that, and God, it was funny.
Right?
I'm just thinking about some of them.
Superbad.
But so those.
Lovin is probably one of my favorite characters.
Lovin. It was either that or Muhammad.
Right. That was such an epic movie, because you had 2 generations of comedians coming out. You had Jonah Hill was just coming out, and then but it also had what's his name in there, the older generation with that was just established with so
the police officers, was it Seth Rogen? Was he a police?
Seth Rogen, yeah. Seth Rogen. So you had the 2 different generation of comedians, and oh man, it played so well.
It was so well. Loved it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, so you've been putting these out there. Now, as you, I want to go back to something that you talked about with with media, what do you think that with what you're doing, how do you think media is an interesting time right now? Because like you said, as we moved into this digital age, it transformed into this beast of we got the information that we suddenly had access to was huge, so much. And there's content everywhere, but yet it was being, like you said, like even with Netflix, they know me better than I do. And you know, you look at things like Facebook and stuff. It's all catered by algorithms, you know, and these algorithms are certainly redundant on the type of information you're getting. What are some of the things that you think? Do you see lights at the end of the tunnel? Do you like some of the new trends coming out with like, let me make an example. One of the things that I love right now is that I kind of love the decentralization of storytelling. That, and this is something that I'm playing with, because like traditionally, if you wanted to get a film out and you wanted to make a film or write a film, you would go through the steps of, you know, you got to kind of get one short film done and you see if that works, and then, you know, or, you know, you try to go to the festival route, and there was just this constant layer of gatekeepers from beginning to end. But now with YouTube, with Vimeo, with, you know, with the podcasting world, anyone can go out and tell amazing stories, you know, and there's not this filter. You know, you sign up for a service, you put out your podcast. Certainly there is hopefully it's good stories, and hopefully you have some skill to create stuff, but there are people that are just releasing and sharing stories that are amazing stories, and it's really good. And that's one of the things that I'm loving about this decentralization. Certainly there's a lot of like low quality stuff that's also coming out, but there's also hidden gems that are coming through because people have the ability. And I know you said your company failed, but that was really an interesting concept, because again, it's the similar type of thing. Like, people should have the ability to share their voice and to share content and information.
I think in many ways there would be more of a market. We could have a clearer consumer proposition now, for a few reasons. One of them being fake news being an increasing problem. The other being the bubbles we live in digitally, as in you wake up on the morning of a presidential election or Brexit or something like that, and you look around and can't believe that the vote's not gone your way because everyone you speak to agrees with you. And so I think that's been those have been some of the problems that have occurred with media. I agree with you, as in like the decentralized. I think there's a lot of positives, but there have also been some negatives, of course.
Super.
And I think that it would have been a stronger concept now, because this isn't for everyone, but there is a group of people who care about, you know, not getting fake news a lot, and could be willing to pay for it. And in, you know, in large cases they aren't. The New York Times has done very well with that. The Guardian's gone for a donation model, but I think is now profitable. So there are some, you know, major players who are helping make it work. But also we have a really much tougher time, you know, politely disagreeing with each other. I'm not saying my platform would have solved that. It was less about sort of discussion and more being an unbiased platform where you could see left and right on the same topic. And that would be really presented. And some people really value that balance. Not everyone. There's a reason why the algorithms keep feeding us what we like seeing. It's because we want to keep hearing that, because we have confirmation bias. Makes us think that we're right. And also, yeah. So I think there's been, you know, a number of negatives. And for my money, more of them come from social media than other forms of media. I think, you know, YouTube, podcasting, etc. I think that's been a lot more positive than the negative. My personal view is social media, obviously there are positives about it, but I think it's been a net negative on the world. A net negative. It's
interesting because it has, One of the things too is with social media, we have all this information, and you can see that with it hasn't been altruistic. The motives of these companies, it's like they're companies. It's not like if you tell people that you're going to be like, do you want Coca-Cola? And I'm just randomly picking a company to control all of the information you have coming to you. People are like, no way. I don't want to have Coca-Cola controlling my information.
Yeah.
You have other companies controlling it, and I think that's an interesting thing is like we are so dependent upon these things that a lot of people don't even seek to question these things that we are being presented with,
I think social media companies need to be regulated more. I think I'm astonished that in the wake of things like scandals like Cambridge Analytica, when, both Brexit and Trump actually were very fine margins that won it, and you've got a shady corporation who, if you get a chance to watch some of their trailers for like how they manipulated elections in other countries, it's absolutely fascinating. But I really believe in social media regulation. I think it could transform it from, in my view, a net negative to, an overwhelming positive. I think a few things, like all advertising, being like much more like strenuously checked and tested as well. I think as well for fake news, for instance, like, pushing misinformation that's been paid for, like anti-vax or something like that, when there is, like objective evidence that something is incorrect. And the other thing is, I think KYCing, knowing your customer so that's what like banks and other financial institutions, they check your passport, etc. to tie you to a bank account. Your social media account should be tied to your profile. So if you troll people, you get blocked and you can't sign up for another account. And there's a real world cost to it, because otherwise they just become like havens for abuse and trolling. It sends a lot of debate offline. That's principally why I think it's unhappy, but also just like the mental health toll that it's had on people.
Right. Well, it's interesting too. The again, being a history major and coming from that background, truth. There is such a thing as truth. That, and we should, as people, be motivated to seek out the most accurate truth we can. Granted, like you go back to a movie like Rashomon. I don't know, have you seen Rashomon?
No.
It's one of the classics of samurai cinema, and it's essentially, without giving away the plot, it's the same story from three perspectives, and each of the people saw the story in a slightly different way. So there was like a murder, and each three characters are like presenting it differently. But yet the idea is to try to figure out what actually happened. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that we are in this world where you talk about fake news as well. And now with deep fakes, man, it's wild. It's wild, the ideas. Elon Musk the other day commented about his Yilan Ma. It's like this person from China who essentially looks like Elon Musk. And he's like, if this guy's real, I want to meet him. But he's like, I don't even think it's person's real. He's like, I think it's a deep fake. And so and so there was this, like, it used to be for the longest time that what you saw with your eyes was truth. And we've now entered this really, Twilight Zone type of period where it no longer is,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, in a good way and a bad way, It's like, I'm not going to lie, I geeked out when in the series, in The Mandalorian, suddenly Luke Skywalker appeared. And I was just like, oh my God, it's Luke Skywalker. But then at the same time, I was like, that's almost terrifying that we're getting to this point, like where, what you see is not, it is so realistic that it creates this level of confusion.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to be clear, I love technology. I'm really excited by technology. I think in the social media case, there's a case for regulation, but generally I'm, want to create, as an open environment as possible so people can go and build and create amazing stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I'm excited by the future of media. Not a subject that I know much about, but all things Web3, the next iteration of the internet, is very exciting, I think, for media, when we can play around in potentially an open metaverse of different worlds where you and we could say tomorrow, okay, you're in Vietnam, I'm here, but let's meet in Paris. We pop on our goggles and we go and hang out there. What does storytelling look like in a world like that? Can't wait to find out. Yeah. Because at each time in storytelling, when the medium evolves, then there's a bit of a lag at the beginning, and then people start really making their own. So, when the TV first came out, they basically put on plays, hence why they were called screenplays, because they didn't know what to do. They just have like a fixed camera, there'd be people on a stage, doing a play, and then they screened it. And then over time you realise, oh my God, we don't need to be on a stage, and look what TV has become. And so we don't know now what story even looks like in this new world, because we will take our stories and we'll have like a love story, but it'll be like, I don't know, it's a love story still, you're in a park somewhere, but you get to watch it, you're in the park, watching the story play out in front of your eyes. Or
what if you're a character?
And then, exactly, characters, and I don't know, proper immersive, theatre meets whatever this new world is, but I think that's really exciting. We don't even know what stories are going to feel like when we get to that.
Are you a Star Trek person, or
only a bit? I mean, I quite like it, but my wife's never been a fan, and we watch basically everything together, so it's never materialized for me.
If you go back to the Next Generation, where Jean-Luc Picard, and we're all like, it was where what's his name? The guy from X-Men.
Patrick Stewart.
Patrick Stewart came up as Jean-Luc Picard, and Geordie LaForge was. Oh man, I'm only remembering character names today, but all these great actors, but not even an important in any way. In that series, they had something called the holodeck, and it's essentially this place that you could go in, and it was like a 3D, and they would run simulations in this 3D, and it was like, it was physical, but it's like, I'm fascinated too by the place that stories go, because as we crank technology up, it's an endless amount of room that we can play with, and I agree with you as well. And there's one thing that I think that was interesting is I don't think we can even contextualize what stories will look like and what our media might look like, because I go back 100 years, 50 years, and you tell people about tablets, and they're gonna be like, you're crazy, you're out of your mind, and like, I remember when I was a kid, and we would talk, people were like, oh yeah, they're gonna have, I bet, gonna have phones in the future, and they're gonna have a camera on it, and it's just mind blown, man.
Yeah.
And now, dude, right here. We're faced, we're recording in 2 different continents. When you popped on, and I was like, oh, those are very English houses behind you. It's just like, but
cool, isn't it?
It's so different, you know what I mean? It's just really fascinating that technology is giving us these opportunities, which comes back to, what would you like to be doing in the next 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? Where would you like to see yourself going?
I mean, the absolute dream is that I could be a screenwriter, writing for film and TV. If I could click my fingers, it was one of those funny things that you often think you're going to enjoy something until you do it for a job. It's like, if you studied English at school, really killed the love of English. And you often think, I'll enjoy, that's a really fascinating company / industry, and then you get in there and it's still kind of just a job. That can happen. It happens regularly. But with this writing, for this film script, I I just loved it from the beginning. I wanted to do it. I'd spend my holidays writing, and so if there could be a world where I could, write stories for a living, that would be a proper dream.
That's awesome. And I think that we're entering this time period that it's easier than ever to create stuff and to highlight it. Like I was reading what was it, UTA, CAA, and all the other WME, all the major talent agencies are now creating divisions, creating departments that go hunting for stories. And because it was, I believe, who was it? One of the major talent agencies, the head of them said, we are entering a creator market. We have now entered this realm where, it used to be that the power was in the studios and they would option stuff and then back burner it for ages. I've got this, someone would be like, I got this script here that I've been holding on to for 30 years. It's like, oh man. But now, people are going out, and this is one of the things that I was talking to one of my friends about, that he and I were like, we've been writing stuff and shooting things together. And I said, what about we try a whole different way? What about if we make it an audio story and it's in space, and like it's in pitch black, and and we run it as a podcast and we're on a spaceship and the lights have gone out, and so the whole thing is done in the dark, and so we run it as an audio story. And he was like, that's rad, man. And because it's like we don't have to have any, it's in deep space, there's no lights, we have all these characters stuck in darkness, and we could just run it as an audio. And like, why not? And if you're creative enough and you have a good enough story, you can make it work, And so the idea, my point being, yeah, man, go for it, because why not?
Yeah, I agree. But it's one of those things that, of course, it's got to be part. I mean, I literally haven't. I have 0 credits. Haven't made a penny. I'm still not actually at the point. So with this other script that I've made, that I've had some professional feedback. I now need to go and rewrite it. That'll take me a while, and then I'll present it again when hopefully finally it'll be ready. But yeah, if you can get to the point where I'm paying my bill or paid my bills like through something else, and then I can focus on just doing that, it would be just unreal.
That's awesome, man. Well, let me ask you this one. If you could go back in time and give your younger self some advice, what advice would you give yourself?
I probably would have told him to take up screenwriting earlier. No joke, to have tried to have just done it, because otherwise you end up in this predicament where you've got like a full-time job, because it's also difficult when you've got a full-time job to write in particular, because I'm best in the mornings creatively.
Yeah.
I'm working, of course. I've got like Saturday, Sunday, holidays is when I do basically all of my writing, because I don't have the juice in the tank to do it in a working week. So I'd probably tell myself that. I would have told myself to buy Bitcoin and Ethereum. Oh, what I'd give for a time machine. No, I don't know, actually. Stuff along those lines. I mean, I think I'd go back with a hell of a to-do list.
That's awesome. No. How about this one? If you were able to transport yourself into any world or universe, like the Harry Potter world, Star Wars, or any film, TV show, which universe would you like to jump into?
That's a great question.
It's a tough
I
one,
want
right?
it to be fun, I don't want to be in something that's...
You don't want to be Game of Thrones.
I don't want any horror. Yeah. Game of Thrones looks nasty. So maybe it would be... it's got to be fantasy. I might have the chance of flying or something like that and have magic. Right. Of course it's fantasy, yeah. I don't... I would like to be yeah, I'd like to have magical powers for sure. Wizard, something like that.
Are we looking at like? I mean, are you gonna lean more toward like Marvel? Are you looking at leaning over toward like Lord of the Rings? Because Hobbit, Tolkien's world a little
yeah. Tolkien's a bit. Tolkien's a bit scary as well, isn't it?
I mean,
I didn't love Harry, as in like I enjoyed Harry Potter, but I didn't go mad on it. I preferred actually Northern Lights, that series. Started with Philip Pullman.
Philip Pullman.
That was my favourite sort of kids fantasy thing. Actually, that would be quite a fun world to go into. But no, I think it is more on like the. I don't think I'd go Tolkien because he's a badass. I heard a great quote about Tolkien actually, which was like, the thing is about all other fantasy writers is they're just rearranging the furniture in Tolkien's attic, which I thought was a great line and actually quite neatly summarises what we're talking about. Like, story structure tends to be quite uniform, and he was the original master of it, and so everything else is literally comparable. That's quite bad. I mean, the Witcher sort of world looked quite fun. I like those. There was another one. Was it The Hands of Time? No, that wasn't amazing. But the trouble is there tend to be pretty epic stakes in most fantasy things where there's an end of the world moment. And so there'll be like orcs or something like that. So that's what's tough. Is there a fantasy comedy? I'd like to be in that world.
What was it? Taika Waititi had one, like What They Do in the Shadows, but it was like vampires.
Oh, yeah. The vampire. You're right. The vampire one was very funny. I'm quite into a vampire as well. I could be a vampire. I think there's my wife's very much into that as well. Forbidden Love.